So I think it's almost about winter now. It's not like super cold, but I got out here this morning and it's 17 degrees. The mud from yesterday's water's frozen. Just poured some fresh water. Yeah, Ginny is super confused about the world right now. This is Ginny's first time in the cold, and luckily she is wearing her kitten cam. Release the Kraken! For the younger ducks, like our runner ducks, as well as Ginny Barn Cat, this is their first time ever in cold and snow. They are not pleased. But ducks tend to get used to the cold pretty darn quickly. Except maybe not those ducks. How you doing, Carm? You having a good morning? Hello, Jemima. Be careful on those slippery slopes. Yeah, you're doing a good job. Go explore that frosty little world for you, sweetie. Morning, chickens! Rise and shine! How you come? Come on, girls. It looks like that Rhode Island Red is starting to go through her milk too. Toby, why you got the zoomies? What's up, buddy? You want to come with me and go see the cattle? So I want to talk to you guys about something, I don't know if I'd call it troubling, but definitely something I discovered on our trail cameras the other day. It's kind of crazy. But first, let's go check on our cows and see how they fared in this cold weather. You're loving this weather, aren't you, Toby? I don't know if folks know this, but I'm pretty certain that winter is Toby Dog's favorite season of the year.
The most wonderful time of the year.
You might think he'd be very unhappy with all the cold and stuff, but he actually seems to thrive on it. Plus, I think he enjoys being camouflaged with the rest of the scenery here. Morning, cows. How's it going? Or as everybody insists I call you coos. Everybody doing good? Friends for a moment. How's it going, Annabelle? You doing good this morning, girl? I don't have any treats today, but I can pet you. If you let me pet you, I'll be your best friend. Yeah, I'll take that as a no. Rejected. How are you, Kurt Cobain? You know I don't have treats, right? You can tell. I'm pretty sure Kurt is like really figured it out. Maybe he hasn't. Okay, boot you on this booper snoot. Oh, good boy. How's it going, Ann? How are you? Good boop you on the booper snoot? No? She let me feed her by hand the other day. It was pretty exciting. Ariel's still a little bit too skittish. And Audrey 1 right here, she doesn't like it either. But the cows continue to get more and more used to me. Yesterday afternoon, I moved them out into this paddock. And this is the freshest stuff. But before I moved them out to bed, I actually just opened up the line so that they could get access to their water and the minerals. And if they want to kind of go through here and clean up anything they missed previously, very soon they're going to be going up into the next paddock. I'm not sure if I'll keep them in here overnight or move them up there later this afternoon. I'm going to see how they do with this patch of grass, but they got plenty to eat right now. You guys are not going to believe this, but would you look at these piles of poop? Look at these mountains. You guys are just clearing out stuff and dropping bombs. Good work. Was that your handiwork, Ann? So I know I keep getting questions about whether or not these gals are pregnant. And I still don't exactly have an answer. I mean, if I look at them though, she's filling out quite nicely in the midsection, but maybe she's just a big healthy cow. She's becoming so chill. Like, I can't believe I can stand this close to her flight zone without having her freak out. I've also now had these cows for almost 8 weeks, and I haven't seen a single one seem like they show any sort of signs of going into heat. I'm not sure if that's a good sign or not. Maybe it's just winter that they don't do that, but from everything I've read, that usually should be happening. And they are not displaying those signs, which is really good. Can I give you a little scratch? I'm not gonna get too aggressive. I can get close, but not too close, apparently. And because I can't get so close, that's partly why I can't actually do like a formal pregnancy test on them. Because in order to really tell if they're pregnant, as well as detect like how things are going and when they're due, the vet would come out with their sonogram and do a scan. What I need to build is like a corral or a chute, as well as a head gate to keep them kind of locked in place. I don't plan on doing that this winter. I'm still not sure exactly even where I want to put it, whether I want to put it inside the permaculture orchard or up on the top of the hill where they're gonna be spending most of their summer. So I'm still figuring that one out. And I still don't have any 100% confirmation that they're pregnant, but I'm seeing good signs. You know, the other thing I will admit that I'm a little sketchy on is if they are pregnant, when their due dates would be. So I will be completely unprepared. And so what I've decided to do is essentially keep any supplies that I would need for calves on hand just in case something happens. In theory, according to the guy I bought the cattle from, if they are pregnant, they would probably be giving birth in like the May-June time period, which from my perspective is pretty close to perfect, but I'm not certain, and I could have some winter babies. And if that's the case, I'm gonna have to, you know, figure some things out, figure out how to get heat to the calves, you know, do a lot of stuff to make sure that the babies grow up happy and healthy. This uncertainty that I'm experiencing right now is part of where, as I start to think about what I want to do for my long-term cattle setup and like what sort of barn and facility do I need, like all of these things are definitely on my mind. Look, Aunt Shirley's trying to give herself a scratching lick of some sort, I think. Would you look at that? She can get back there and scratch pretty good. You know, at some point I want to give them scratching posts, but I'm not set up for that just yet. Lots of commenters have suggested that one. Let's check on the water situation here, huh? Frozen solid. I'm finding that they drink surprisingly little water, a lot less than I would have expected. It's going to be ultimately the water situation that means I have to bring them inside to the winter setup because it's going to get harder and harder to run water out to them on a regular basis with the hoses. Some of the days won't get above freezing, and when that happens, it's really tough to do the water situation. There we go. Now they can access water. Of course, my glove is now soaked. So like I was saying, they're gonna go up that alleyway and start grazing the next lane. That next lane is gonna give them, I don't know, maybe about 8 days worth of grazing before they get to the end of that. I might take them to the next lane up over that, or I might just let them end and finish up and then bring them down to the barn. It's very much gonna just depend on what the weather situation's like over the next week or two. If it gets much colder, I'll probably bring them in. If it stays like this, I'll probably leave them out. But yeah, the weather is most definitely turning. And one of the things that I've noticed is actually, if I look out in the pasture and look at some of the wildlife that's been coming and going, it's been quite interesting. As you guys saw in my last video, we're getting to the tail end of deer hunting season, or at least deer rifle hunting season. So I'm still very much actively tracking like the movement of the animals around the farm and our property. But actually a couple of weeks ago, I did something interesting as an experiment. You know, whenever we butcher birds here on the farm, I try to, you know, make sure that, you know, all the meat obviously goes for human consumption. A lot of the organ meats actually end up going to Toby Dog as part of his dog food rotation. But I am still left with some scraps that I need to find a home for. So for example, like all the chicken feathers, where do they go? Or some of their organs that I don't like to feed to Toby just because I feel like it's unclean and unhealthy, even though it's probably okay for him to eat them. Like for example, the intestines, I typically will take those and set those aside, and I just have this, you know, offal or offal, however you want to pronounce it, that's sort of left over from butchering. And as you guys know, we did do a batch of chickens earlier this month, and so I took the scraps and innards and I put them in the far back reaches of our property. I do this practice pretty much every year just so that they can compost further away from the farm. And I'm always curious to see what animals end up turning up to explore the compost pile. But over the last couple of weeks, the compost visitors have been very interesting. You know, for example, black bear showed up, and we had some raccoons show up, and we even had some coyotes showing up. And whenever any of these creatures make appearances around the farm, I just love watching them. It's so amazing to me, you know, as a kid who grew up in the suburbs, to like see wildlife like this up close, living wild all around our property. Yes, we have, you know, our domestic livestock here on the farm, and we even have little critters like Jeannie Barn Cat hanging out here on the farm. And I'm very surprised that she made it up here. She has never come up, to my knowledge, this far along the property here. I imagine she is terrified of the cattle, but it is kind of fun to see her move around and explore. I just hope she doesn't get stomped by the cattle. You know, Pablo Barn Cat spooked the cattle the other day. Oh, she knows where she shouldn't be. The cattle are like, yeah, we don't like critters like that coming around. You know, the cattle will accept Toby Dog, and you know, they will hang out with him and let him wander around as long as he doesn't get too up close to them, but they definitely don't like the cats. Jeannie's going for another try. Oh, there there's Molly. She decided to join Ginny out here. They both are waiting for me to feed them. That's probably why they came out here this far. I mean, it's really not surprising to me that they don't like an animal like Ginny, because one of the natural predators that our cattle are going to have to contend with are super ferocious felines. You know, for example, as I've been looking at the wildlife that's showing up here on the farm and looking at those trail cameras, one of the animals I've noticed coming around a bit regularly is this very large cat. You can see it here, right? See here, it's wandering one afternoon going through. Here's another shot of it going through at night. And as I'm looking at it, I'm struggling. So when I first got some of that footage, I was actually watching it with my friend Josh from the Stony Ridge Farm on a live stream on Facebook. And when we were both looking at it, we were both kind of thinking it was a bobcat of some sort, albeit a very large bobcat. But then actually the other day, my buddy Jack over at the Mindful Homestead, he messaged me and was saying, I don't think that's a bobcat, I think that's a lynx. And when I look at the footage, I think he kind of has a point. I mean, if I'm looking at the movement and the way it walks, I don't know, it sort of seems like almost somewhere halfway between a lynx and a bobcat. We are in kind of the lowest southern reaches of lynx territory, Canada lynx territory around here on our farm, so it's not unheard of for them to be around, but they're also not super common. The animal that's much more frequently around is the bobcat, or the barn cat. Look at this. Let's see what happens here. Jenny, you do not want to mess with the bull, or at least the steer, because you are going to get the horns, girl. So anyway, back to my story. Bobcats are much more common around here on the farm. And I've seen bobcats over the years. You know, before we actually had Mr. Toby Dog here on the farm, we actually had this one bobcat that was coming around regularly stalking the ducks. And I even think that a bobcat was the animal that actually killed Delilah Puddle Duck, the son of Samuel and Jemima Puddle Duck, sister of Samson. Rest in power, girl. You know, like for example, like there were a couple times when I'd be out doing chores and I would suddenly stumble upon a bobcat. Boom, right there. And that type of an experience where you have like a bobcat stalking about as close to me as I am right now as Anna Green Gables is, that's pretty nuts. And I looked really closely at various comparison guides between a bobcat and a lynx and tried to determine if I had one or the other, and I just couldn't quite come to a conclusion. Well, as I was watching the cameras that were set up over by where I left the chicken waste, I think I finally got a conclusive answer. Like if you watch this footage really closely, right, you can see that, you know, there are certain markers that let me know what type of animal this is. So for example, it has a little bit of white on the tip of its tail, and you know, some of the other coloring that it has, as well as some of the facial features. And I really feel like I get a good look at its back legs. All of those are ways that you identify a lynx and determine the difference between the lynx and the bobcat. And all of the signs that I saw from that up close camera would suggest that I have a bobcat on my hands. And so I'd be curious, as you guys are watching this footage, what your guess is. Do I have a lynx or do I have a bobcat? Or I'll also throw out one other scenario, maybe I have both. You know, it's not to say that the animal that I saw going through the chicken waste was necessarily the same animal that I saw going through the pasture about 2 weeks earlier. So that could be a lynx at the beginning and a bobcat at the end, but my guess is it's a bobcat in both settings. And I even think it's probably the same animal. I'll take any and all theories down in the comments. Now, some of you now might be hearing this story and saying, well, that's kind of interesting, but you know, Morgan, to have a large predator cat like that stalking your farm isn't a good thing. Aren't you concerned? And the answer is not really, because if I think about the cattle, for example, I'm not too worried that they are gonna get attacked by a bobcat. As you can see, they would scare an animal like a cat predator away. Yes, Ginny Barn Cat is much more gentle. And yes, Ginny is probably about 20 to 35 pounds lighter than a bobcat.
We got the same Ginny Weasley from the Basilisk.
I think that they would chase him away, and most wild predators look for animals that are smaller and weaker than them.
You can't take my best friend's sister.
It's not like a bobcat's gonna be able to do anything to an 800, 900 pound cow that has horns that are about the size of the bobcat's legs. And so I'm really just not that worried about the cattle. And when it comes to the ducks, geese, and chickens, I'm not exceptionally worried either, because we have a very special creature living here on the farm, and that creature is Mr. Toby Dog. And again, the bobcat is not gonna wanna mix it up with an animal that's much bigger and larger. You know, I haven't seen the bobcat any closer than maybe 1,500 yards, 2,000 yards, I don't know, somewhere in between there, from the spot that I'm standing in right now. And again, we are in the farther back portion of the permaculture orchard. So the cattle are out here, but the ducks and geese and chickens are all the way down there. The more and more you get to human civilization, the more and more in this part of the world, bobcats are gonna stay away. And so, yeah, I need to take precautions. Yeah, I need to be vigilant. Yeah, it's great that I have a 5-foot high fence with electricity on the top wire. All those things don't make the biggest difference. The thing that's gonna make the biggest difference with a bobcat is Mr. Toby Dog right here. Isn't that right, mister? And I'm also not too worried about him actually fighting, because what it's gonna be about with him is intimidation and having this area be known as his territory versus having him scrap it up. Not that it would even ever happen, but if there was a fight between Toby Dog and a bobcat, remember, Toby Dog is a little shy of 100 pounds. The bobcat, you know, on the top end probably weighs about 40 pounds or so. It's more than twice his size. Of course, I will say, one cat creature that's pretty fearless is little Ginny Barn Cat here. Would you look at her? She keeps coming back. She likes to play with Toby Dog, and she's very, very curious about the cattle. Hopefully that doesn't cause any problems. My biggest risk with the cattle, I feel like, is that a creature like Ginny causes a stampede, and then they just blow right through their fencing. And I have worked so hard to train him to this fencing. So Ginny, I don't want you causing any problems, huh? Come here. So what do you think, Ginny? They're pretty big, they're pretty majestic. You like these cattle? You're purring like you like these cattle. I think she likes these cattle. So yeah, that's the latest update here on the farm. If you guys are curious about when the bobcat was actually here stalking our animals, I'll go flash back a video for you that you can watch where you can see that. I'll leave a link for it right here. And I will see you guys in that next video. Thank you for watching. I gotta get Ginny inside and feed her. Have a great day, guys.